Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the introduction. I'm only going to talk about two issues, which is housing, demographics that we have now and the changing demographics in the country, and the type of housing we need. Just ahead of that, for those of you who are particularly interested in the area of housing and the fact we have a new government in place now, the two things that are going to happen in the immediate future is the Oireachtas has a Housing and Homelessness Committee, and their recommendations report is going to be issued this Friday. So that'll be coming out this Friday. And then the Minister for Housing, Planning and Local Government, Simon Coveney, will in July be then issuing the Housing Action Plan, a new plan in relation to addressing our overall housing crisis that we're facing currently. But what I'm going to turn to is really just a couple of issues in terms of to think about where we are going with that housing and the type of housing we need in the future. In terms of the housing agency who I work for, our vision is to enable everyone to live in affordable homes of good quality in good areas to live. So we all need good housing, and we all want to live in good areas. The four key issues are: one is the affordability of housing. Whether one is renting or buying, affordability is something that's key, and often it's something we haven't been focusing on enough. We need to ensure that we're providing housing that's affordable. We need sufficient availability of housing, and there is a significant issue, particularly in the Dublin region at the moment, in terms of the availability of housing. We need quality, and we need good places to live. You've seen an awful lot of statistics in terms of the population of the country, the changes in rent costs, changes in house prices, changes in household size. And one area I want to focus on a lot from a demographics point of view is the change in household size. But before I do that, often in terms of housing, there's a lot of focus on small areas, and small cohorts in housing. On a national basis, the amount of houses that are owned would be of the order of 70%. The amount that are rented, about 30%. Now, when that comes into Dublin, it would be 50-50 between rented housing and owned housing. But an overall view of the housing market in Ireland, there's houses that are owned, owner-occupied. That can be without a mortgage, with a mortgage in difficulties. And one of our huge issues at the moment, there's 200,000 mortgages where people are in arrears or they're restructured, which may not be sustainable into the future. And then we have the rented sector, and there's a variety of aspects to rented centre, and then we have empty homes. So all I'm saying is there's a huge variety in the whole housing sector in Ireland. In terms of the future, I'm going to just concentrate on a couple of issues, and one is demographics. And the one thing I just want to ask you, two questions. One is, are you aware of how household sizes have dramatically changed in Ireland? And I'd ask you all, now or later, to think about: do we all understand how the demographic changes have happened in Ireland and how significant they are? Ireland's household size has been dropping at twice the rate of any other European country for the last 50 years. We have been going through a very rapid change in household size, and it's something actually not only for a housing point of view, but from education point of view, from health, from all aspects of society. It's something that I don't think has really sank into our mentality, because it has happened relatively quickly compared to any other country. And taking account of the fact that our household size has changed so dramatically. Is anyone thinking about the types of housing that we need, taking into account that the household sizes we have now? I'm not saying it's necessarily smaller housing. We talk about, John Harris spoke earlier about 3-bedroom houses. Why do you need a 3-bedroom house? If there's only going to be 2 people living in the house, are you not better off having, a big living area, a study, other aspects of your house, rather than being focusing on the number of bedrooms in a house or the size of a house? It's what are your needs, and so we really need to take into account household size. I'm going to skip on to the next slide. In terms of the households in the country, 75% of all housing is taken up by 1-person, 2-person, and 3-person households. And I'd ask you to think about what does that mean. The number of single persons might be 8% of the population, but the amount of housing stock it takes 1-person households take up is 25% of all the housing stock in the country is taken up by 1-person households. 30%, the biggest cohort of households in the country is 2-person households, so take up 30% of the housing stock. 3-person households, another 19%. So there's only 25% is required for households above 3-person households. And again, I'd ask you to look at that. I just wanted to show you this graph. Maybe it doesn't look as dramatic as it might seem, but in 1920, in the UK, in Germany, in France, in most of mainland Europe, there was 4 persons per household. Was in 1920, nearly 100 years ago. In Ireland, we were at 4 persons per household in 1970, and we have, in a very short period of time, are rapidly moving towards the European average. And I think it's happened relatively quickly, and I don't think we actually appreciate or understand what that means, and we haven't adjusted in terms of the housing we're providing or the thinking we're doing in terms of housing. On housing, often people talk about housing density, and should we how many houses or apartments should we have per acre? That is irrelevant. Most of Europe, they don't talk about housing density. They talk about population density. We need to make an area work, or be able to provide public transport, provide facilities, provide schools. We need sufficient population density. So when we're looking at development plans and how we're using the land that we have to look at population density and ensuring that we're getting enough use of the population, of the density. And it's because of the rapidly changing, the significantly changed household sizes. So the other question I want to ask you, maybe which I don't think really has been asked in relation to the environment and sustainability of housing. People talk about energy efficient housing or green housing, but nobody really has thought about it seriously, in terms of, so just maybe ask all of us in terms of are we interested in the environment? Are we interested in sustainability? And are we genuinely interested in it? Do we want to reduce our environmental footprint, as individuals, as a society? How are we using the resources that we have? How are we using the land that we have? The ideal people wanting, a big house. If you have a big house, and the bigger the house, the more successful you are. But if you're 1 or 2 people living in a big house, you're very inefficient, very unsustainable, very unenvironmentally friendly. On the environmental side, we need to be thinking about there's massive demographic changes. how do we, if we're genuine about the environment and genuine about sustainability, how can we reduce our environmental footprint? How can we use, as individuals and people, less resources, reduce our belongings, and also then achieving affordability in our housing. So the two big questions I want you just to think about is, think about household sizes and how they've changed and what that means to us, and think about on the sustainability side, on the environmental side, we shouldn't be thinking about bigger, why do you want a 5-bedroom house, that half the house isn't going to be utilised. Yes, have good living areas, the spaces that you're going to use in a house, but don't be just having large properties just for the sake of it, or that one thinks that's better. So we really need to think about, in terms of we're building houses, why are we building? An awful lot of focus on using new sites and new lands. The one thing that we haven't been doing enough in Ireland relative to other countries is using the brownfield sites. We did make good use of the Dublin Docklands, but we need to make better use of those areas that have been previously developed, have infrastructure in place, and not be using up good agricultural lands around our towns and cities in the country. I won't, in terms of just making this work, it needs everybody to work together of all sectors. Just finish off with 2 slides, just some of the critical issues. And I don't apologise for saying we really need to understand our changing demographics. And I don't think we understand it in this country because we're different from every other country in Europe, and nearly every other country in Europe, and how rapidly the changes have happened. We need housing supply, but we also need to make better use of the buildings and the housing that we have got. I mean, in terms of dealing with demographics, there's 2 ways you can deal with it. One is smaller housing or whatever, but the other way of doing it is having shared housing. That more people living together. So you can either reduce the number of people living in a household, or else have more shared accommodation, and to move into that area. We need to think about both the ownership area and the rental sector. One thing that we haven't really done, we've an awful lot of focus has been on our whole development industry has been focused on building to sell as opposed to building to rent. If you take one example, if you take the North Docklands, so if you take between the River Liffey and the Tolka River, and from the Custom House down, so all of East Wall, all of the North Docklands, 90% of all the housing in the apartments in that area is rented. 90% is rented. It was all built, sold, and then rented. And I think if it was built directly to rent in the first case, we would have achieved better quality apartments, better housing, because the person building it would be worried about management and maintenance, long-term running costs, where if somebody is building just to sell, particularly in apartments, have little or no consideration to the management and running costs. And I say that with having the experience of having to deal with a couple of apartment developments that were built in that way. Affordability is absolutely critical. From all aspects, we need to make sure, in terms of the standards we look for and our costs of providing housing, that are affordable. And we need to address a lot of different needs, and we need to collaborate. And then just some final issues. How do we use, in terms of the housing that we have and the buildings that we have, to best effect? That are we using what we have sufficiently? How can we improve the level of occupancy of our existing stock? Now, I know it's an emotive issue, but even in Dublin, there's 70% of Dublin we're having depopulation. So we have serious issues of vast areas of Dublin where there's huge needs, but we're into depopulation because of underutilisation of our housing stock. What type of new housing do we need to provide? And then from an education point of view, we really need to understand, better understanding of where we are going as a society and what we need, and definitely not going down this, just following what we did in the past in terms of how we provided housing. So there, I'll leave you with those, questions, and just demographics and sustainability will be. I just ask you to think about those two issues. So thank you very much.